The hum of the fluorescent lights was Elias Thorne's constant companion, a dull drone that had replaced the roar of engines and the silent vastness of space. Here, in the polished halls of the university, he was simply the night janitor, a stooped figure with a perpetually tired gaze and a limp that slowed his every step. Students hurried past him, their faces bright with ambition, never noticing the quiet dignity in his movements, the meticulous care with which he wiped down surfaces, or the way his eyes, ancient and knowing, absorbed everything. He was just part of the background, a ghost in a blue uniform. Tonight was the annual Alumni Recognition Gala, a glittering affair in the Grand Lecture Hall. Elias had spent hours preparing, buffing the floors until they gleamed, arranging chairs with military precision. As the first wave of guests arrived, a group of particularly boisterous students, fresh from a celebratory dinner, swept past him. One, a young man with a smirk and a designer suit, stumbled theatrically, sending a cascade of champagne bubbles dangerously close to Elias's freshly cleaned floor. "Watch it, old-timer," the student sneered, not bothering to apologize. His friends snickered. "Wouldn't want you to break a hip trying to clean that up." Elias merely nodded, his gaze unwavering, and knelt to dab at the small spill. His hip, a legacy of a life far removed from this polished hall, throbbed with the effort. A moment later, Professor Albright, the head of the physics department and the evening's host, approached, clipboard in hand. "Thorne, are you quite finished?" Albright's voice was clipped, impatient. "We need this hall ready. You're holding things up." Elias rose slowly, his hands still clutching a damp cloth. "Just a small spill, Professor. And, if I may, the projector mount seems a little loose. Might be worth a quick check before the ceremony." Albright scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, Thorne. It's perfectly fine. Just focus on your duties. We have important people arriving." He strode away, leaving Elias to finish his quiet work, the laughter of the students echoing behind him. Elias finished wiping, then moved to the side, leaning against a wall, a silent sentinel watching the hall fill. No one saw him. No one cared. Not yet. The ceremony began. Speeches droned on, punctuated by polite applause. Then, the moment arrived for the evening's highest honor, the Lifetime Achievement Award. The Chancellor stepped to the podium, his voice swelling with pride as he introduced the recipient, Dr. Elias Thorne, the celebrated astrophysicist and former astronaut, a man whose pioneering work had reshaped humanity's understanding of the cosmos. A ripple of excited whispers went through the crowd. Dr. Elias Thorne, a figure of commanding presence, walked to the podium. His silver hair caught the light, his eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room. He began his acceptance speech, his voice resonating with quiet power. "Thank you, Chancellor, esteemed colleagues, and bright young minds of tomorrow. It is truly an honor to stand here tonight." Then his gaze drifted to the back of the hall, where Elias Thorne stood, a faint shadow against the polished wood. Elias Thorne paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. The audience shifted, sensing the change in his demeanor. He stopped speaking altogether. "Elias?" Elias Thorne's voice was soft, almost a question, yet it cut through the murmuring crowd. Every head turned. Elias, startled, straightened slightly, his quiet presence suddenly amplified. Professor Albright frowned, stepping forward. "Dr. Thorne, is there a problem?" "That's just one of our janitorial staff." Elias Thorne ignored him, his eyes still fixed on Elias. "No, Professor. There is no problem. There is, however, a profound oversight." He turned back to the microphone, his voice now imbued with a new, solemn authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I continue, I must correct a grave injustice. The true hero of this room, perhaps of this university, is not standing here at this podium, but quietly in the back." A hush fell over the hall. Elias Thorne extended a hand towards Elias. Many of you know me as an astronaut, a scientist. What few know is that 40 years ago, I was a junior officer on the Orion 3 deep space research vessel. We were on a critical mission, miles from Earth, when a catastrophic systems failure plunged us into darkness, with only minutes before complete atmospheric breach. Panic set in. All protocols failed. His gaze locked with Elias's. There was one man, and only one, who saw the impossible solution. He was our lead engineer, a brilliant, unassuming mind. He made a split-second decision, sacrificing his own safety, risking everything, to manually override a failing conduit. He crawled through a burning access tunnel, the heat searing his flesh, the air thin and toxic, knowing he might not make it back. He saved every life on that ship, including mine. The limp he carries today is a permanent reminder of that selfless act. Elias Thorne's voice deepened, resonating through the silent hall. He never sought commendation. He never spoke of it. He left the program shortly after, choosing a life of quiet service. He is Elias Thorne. Not a janitor, but a decorated aerospace engineer, a true hero who chose anonymity over accolades. He is the reason I am here tonight. He is the reason we are all here. The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by the soft click of cameras. The students who had mocked Elias now stood frozen, their smirks replaced by gaping mouths, their faces flushing crimson. Professor Albright's jaw hung slack, his clipboard forgotten. The chancellor, usually so composed, looked utterly bewildered, then slowly, almost reverently, began to applaud. The applause spread, a wave of stunned realization, rising to a thunderous ovation. Elias Thorne stepped down from the podium and walked directly to Elias. He stood before him, his hand extended. "Chief Thorne," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it has been my lifelong regret that I never properly thanked you. Thank you for my life. Thank you for everything." Elias looked at the outstretched hand, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, raised his own. Their hands met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Elias's eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of something akin to warmth. He didn't speak, didn't nod. He simply held the gaze of the man he had saved, a man who had finally seen him. Professor Albright, finding his voice, stammered, "Mr. Thorne, all charges." "I mean, of course, your position. Anything you need." Elias Thorne cut him off, his voice calm but firm. "The only thing Chief Thorne needs is the respect he has always deserved. And perhaps a working projector mount." Elias slowly withdrew his hand. He looked around the room, at the sea of faces, no longer dismissive, but filled with awe and shame. He didn't thank anyone. He didn't need to. He simply turned, his limp a little less pronounced, and walked towards the back exit, the thunderous applause trailing behind him like a distant echo. Elias Thorne watched him go, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. Elias Thorne didn't return to his duties that night. He didn't go home either. He drove his old, beat-up truck to the university's observatory, a place he hadn't visited in decades. He parked in the shadows, away from the glow of the city, and stepped out into the cool night air. The sky above was a vast, indifferent canvas, sprinkled with a million distant stars. He looked up, his gaze steady, searching the familiar constellations. In his pocket, a small, polished brass pin, pressed into his hand by Elias Thorne as they parted, felt heavy. It wasn't a medal, just a simple, unadorned pin from the Orion 3 mission, given to every crew member. He hadn't worn it in years. He hadn't needed to, but tonight it felt different. It was a silent acknowledgement that his sacrifice, his quiet life, had not been forgotten. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just stood there, letting the cold night air and the silent stars wash over him. He hadn't wanted recognition. He still didn't. But something in that grand lecture hall had shifted, cracked the wall he'd built around himself. The world hadn't remembered him, but someone had. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. Later that week, word spread. Not viral, not loud, just quietly among the right people. At the university, the story of Elias Thorne became a hushed legend. The students who had mocked him were seen cleaning up spills themselves, their faces grim with newfound humility. Professor Albright quietly resigned from his hosting duties, replaced by a younger, more empathetic colleague. The projector mount, Elias had pointed out, was indeed faulty and was fixed the very next day. As for Elias, he resumed his routines. Same quiet presence, same meticulous work. But those who passed him now noticed something had changed. He stood a little straighter, not prouder, just steadier, less like a shadow, more like a man willing to be seen again. And once a month, without fail, he would take a quiet walk through the university's physics department, not to watch, not to relive, but to sit on a quiet bench near the main hall, anonymous among the crowd, listening, observing. Not because he wanted to relive what happened, but because maybe, just maybe, someone else might need what he'd once been denied. A second look. He never wanted a lecture hall full of silence. Never wanted a renowned astronaut to walk through a door to defend him. All Elias Thorne ever wanted was peace, to be left alone, to carry the weight he'd earned without having to prove it to anyone. But when the world forgets what a hero looks like, sometimes it takes one moment, one gesture to remind everyone. He didn't need a medal pinned on his chest or his name in the paper. He didn't ask for that. All he needed was to know that after everything he gave, someone still saw him. And sometimes that's all any of them want, because not all warriors speak. Some serve in silence. And when they come home, most just want to live quietly with the dignity they never demanded and the respect they never asked for. So, if you ever pass a man like Elias on a bench, in a waiting room, maybe even in a university hall, look again. Because you might be looking at someone who changed the course of history and never said a word about it.